This is my summary reflection for Foundations and Theories of Counseling with Naja Dhruva, and I'm Sarah Coons. Let's get started. I'm going to be focusing this reflection on Adlerian therapy, also known as individual therapy. And this is a great therapeutic approach because it really focuses on positivity, on goal setting, and becoming not just our best selves, or as Adler says, striving for perfection, but doing so in a way that is harmonious and beneficial to our environment, to our relationships, to our community. One specific thing I love about this therapeutic approach is the acknowledgement of feelings of inferiority. Adler talks about how these feelings of inferiority really kind of make us who we are, but they can go two ways. So on one hand, these feelings of inferiority might have some maladaptive coping responses, things that result in bids for power struggles. If you want a good example of this, there's a book called Too Much Not Enough about Donald Trump. And it's a great example of how when someone is made to feel inferior, either from their own self-talk or their family, there's this insatiable hunger for wholeness, for power, for recognition, or even goodness. That is just that. It's insatiable, and it often, almost always in this case, costs others. It costs them their well-being, it costs them even their power, even sometimes their rights, which is obviously a pretty serious problem. But on the other hand of feelings of inferiority, we can use these things as clues. Well, it's never directly said this way in this book or the things I found online. What I love about Adlerian therapy is these feelings of inferiority can actually be little breadcrumbs that take us to our wholeness. When we adapt and cope with them in a positive way, we not only self-actualize and feel better about ourselves and feel more whole in ourselves, but we then show up in a way that's more nourishing for our relationships, our family, our community. We become a harmonious part of the world around us and ultimately fully understand why we are here. That's why we're here, is to figure out why we're here. And so I love that. Okay, let's dig into Adlerian therapy. So looking at my own experience in relation to learning this, I definitely resonate with this idea of a sense of belonging, of contribution, and finding my place and really my meaning for being here in the world by listening to those inner voices of inferiority. And personally, I'll get into this more later, but I'm biracial. I'm from a mixed race household. So I have two very different cultural narratives I grew up with that have for sure affected my feelings of inferiority, and more importantly, whether I respond to them in a maladaptive or more productively adaptive way. I've always kind of identified as a perfectionist, and Adler says, this is a strive for perfection, and I actually have a negative connotation with that, which is why I say strive for wholeness or self-actualization, because perfection is impossible. But throughout my life, the feelings of inferiority have, gone two ways, just like this therapeutic approach suggests. A lot of times it's just trying to meet the needs and expectations of my family. I come from a very achievement valuing family. And so I actually took on narratives that weren't mine about what wholeness and perfection is, which I'll talk about in a later section in terms of the strengths and weaknesses of this approach. One thing that really came up for me was this idea of compensatory behaviors, which I hope I'm saying right, and that when we have these feelings of inadequacy, we compensate in good or bad ways. And for a lot of my life, I have compensated for this in ways that aren't good. I have pushed myself too hard. I've become an overachiever. I've become a control freak, especially after experiencing trauma and managing post-traumatic stress disorder. Control becomes a very big part of a person's life after that, which I relate to. But through my own work in therapy, and especially over the last few years, I've come to call myself a recovering perfectionist. And in the last year in particular, I've really decided and practiced letting these feelings of inferiority not become a script or manual for this is what you're going to do and you have to control every step, but for suggestions that keep me on the path. In my personal experience, when we respond to these feelings of inferiority with a positive reaction, with a nourishing, helpful, healing, self-actualizing reaction, it's never prescriptive, do A, B, and C. It's ooh, this is a strong feeling. This is a direction I need to go in. Let me walk this path. It's not a step here, then step here. I think that step here, then step here is actually a sneaky maladaptive coping tool coming in trying to control things. And as we know, we can't control life. And when I think of how I'm going to sit with clients using this as a therapist, they're not going to be able to control everything in their life. And so it's helped me a lot to experience the two different versions of this, like even within a positive response to feelings of inferiority, there's still ways that are more helpful than others to adapt and actualize that perfection. All right, now let's look at strengths and weaknesses. I think a lot of the strengths here are very clear. It's very positive, it's very goal-oriented, and huge positive to this, huge strength is that it really emphasizes social parts, cultural parts, being a contributor, being in harmony, finding your sense of place in the world. However, on the weaker side, it's not really an immediate relief thing. It's not something where you can it's not like ACT or CBT, which I don't know a ton about, but I know they're a little more directed than this. This is a little more ethereal. It's a little more big picture. It can be a little introspective, right? It's still kind of analytic, and that's not going to work for everybody. More importantly, on the weaknesses is that this whole therapeutic approach feels very American, right? Striving for perfection, the individual actualization. But coming from a biracial household, I have direct experience of what it's like when that is not the culture you grow up with. And it's really important to have that lens on when working with a client of what is their culture, what is serving them in their culture, what I might consider a perfection for an individual is going to be something different for an individual that comes from a collectivist culture. I think I've spoken to a lot about what this appeals to me and how I would use it in a clinical setting, but just to get a little more specific, I can see particularly an inpatient doing a little more focus on early memories, family relationship, birth order, dream analysis, goal setting, task setting, reflection, encouragement, helping the client develop courage. Whereas in the outpatient setting, I can see this being more robust, where I do all the same things as inpatient, but then we get to do things like role play. There's a lot more opportunity for encouragement as well, because you're working on something with the client, they go out into the world, and then they come back and you reflect, you share, you celebrate. I also think there's a great place for Socratic questioning, which is a skill I love and honestly definitely need to work on. In both settings, and potentially even in group settings, I can see myself working with schemas a lot. Personally, this is something my therapist has done with me, and it has been extremely helpful. It's really helped me turn these feelings of inferiority into breadcrumbs, not things that take me down a wrong path into power struggles. Overall, I love this approach's really positive orientation, and most importantly, the idea that the client knows best. The client knows what wholeness is for them, and it's my job as the therapist to create a space of encouragement that helps them feel the courage to pursue that in a way that is harmonious with the world around them and helps them feel like they have a sense of place and belonging in the world. Okay, thank you. Bye.